Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Great topic today, one of my favorites, and I hope it's one of yours. What's the creepiest thing you've ever found in a forest? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
It's not what I found, but what I didn't find. Me and my sister were terrified of our Furbies as children. We were 100% confident they were sentient. We buried them in the woods. 10 years later, I went back to that same spot to dig them out of nostalgia, and they were not there. Probably dug themselves out. Not nearly as creepy as the other comments, but an antique steam engine full of and surrounded by insulated lunch bags. It's not far from where I live on the other side of Gold Creek in Juneau, Alaska. Really easy to get to, yet I've only ever heard it mentioned by one other person. Supposedly, it was all collected by an old homeless guy that also buried filtered water bottles and multi-plastic wrapped assorted trinkets like he was prepared for some sort of disaster. Apparently, he was kicked out of the homeless shelter for not bathing and would only eat out of trash cans, even when offered food. It would have been disguised as garbage, and live a very isolated lifestyle. At a later date, for quite some time, I had wondered why he had a mannequin sitting up in his town cave just above the Red Dog Saloon. So finally asked my boyfriend at the time to go investigate with me. Turns out, it was his partially mummified corpse sitting in a chair. You could see him from the doors of the bar, but no one ever looked up, I guess. Saddest part was the whole time he lived in Juneau, no one ever found out his name and just called him Trash Can. When I was in 8th grade, I went on a 10-day backpacking trip along the Appalachian Trail, mostly through western Massachusetts. On day 3 or 4, after setting up camp, a few of us wandered deep into the woods and stumbled upon an airplane wing. It was really haunting to find it there by itself in the middle of nowhere. We searched all around the area but didn't find any more of the plane. But we had camped on the edge of a lake, so it's possible that the rest of the plane was at the bottom somewhere. We meant to tell the authorities when we got back, but by the end of the trip, we, being stupid kids, had forgotten about it and never did tell anyone. Every once in a while, something like this post will remind me about it, and I wonder whatever happened to the passengers and the rest of the plane. Oh, not sure if this was just creepy or straight dumb. Drove out down the gravel dirt road, not knowing it was actually a hole in the fence to a military base. Covered my car, grabbed my gear and dog, bedded down, went to bed. Next morning went exploring after setting up a fire and heard guys yelling. Obviously, I'm an idiot and tried to sneak up, only to realize I'm on a hole overlooking a motor pool. Hear a click and was told not to move, get handcuffed and brought to my camp, and have to explain to a couple of really pissed off MPs or why or how I got onto the base. They didn't believe me, so I had them drive down this dinky roadway, and sure enough, they were satisfied I wasn't lying. Did get yelled at though. My friends and I used to hike and camp up by the French River in northern Ontario. For anyone unfamiliar with this area, it is extremely remote. You have to leave your car, canoe, a few hours, then carry your canoe to your campsite. On this occasion, we were camping for 10 days. There were 4 of us, and we didn't see another person or any signs of anyone else near us. On day 3, we decided to wake up early and hike along the river going north. One of my friends was really good with maps and planning hikes for us, and he said that this one is about a 9-hour hike, there and back to our campsite. We started our hike at 6 a.m. and around noon stopped to swim for a bit in the river to cool off, followed by some lunch that we packed and a beer or 2 each. We started packing up again and noticed a small cabin off in the distance about 25 meters downstream. We knew we would come back the same direction, and we put our garage in the bag with our beer cans and hoisted it up over a tree. This is a common thing to do while camping, as it keeps wildlife such as bears away from getting into your garbage. We knew we would be back the same way in a few hours to collect our garbage to bring back to our main campsite. For the remainder of the hike, I couldn't help but feel like someone was watching us, but there were no other signs of people around us. When we reached the end point, nearly exhausted but also satisfied with how far we had come, we debated stopping again for a rest before making the 6-hour walk back to our main campsite. As we discussed, I mentioned that I kind of just want to get back to our campsite because I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. 2 of my 3 friends then also admitted they had a similar feeling, so we decided to head back. As we approached the area where we rested and swam earlier, we came across our garbage bags. It had been removed from the tree and emptied. The weird thing was that it wasn't ripped or torn as you might expect from an animal. Instead, it was untied and neatly emptied and left wide open on the ground. We remembered the old cabin downstream, but there was no sign of it this time. As we walked a little further, we saw something on top of a rock. It was our beer cans. We consumed 2 each, so there were 8 empty beer cans. Only they weren't just scattered on the rock as you might expect from an animal. They were neatly piled in a pyramid-type shape. As we got closer, we realized we noticed a Polaroid photo tucked under the bottom one. It was a photo of the 4 of us swimming. Completely freaked out at this point, we half ran and half walked back to our campsite. We arrived at dusk and decided that this night would be the last night of our originally planned 10-day camping trip. None of us slept a wink that night. We stayed up by the fire, terrified and hoping for morning to come. By sunrise, we packed up and hiked out with our canoes. We were so happy to see our vehicles where we left it and drove home together in silence.
Giving you the benefit of the doubt, and assuming this is true, you absolutely did the right thing. I'm surprised you guys even lasted that last night. That's freaky as hell.
I found a loaded pistol wrapped in plastic wrap and shoved into a creek bank. I was working for the state doing water quality monitoring at the time, so I technically wasn't allowed to have it in a work truck, but I knew I should take it to the sheriff. And I was an hour's drive from a signal, so I carefully removed it, took a GPS point and pictures of where I found it, and brought it in. An elephant, seriously, in the woods near White Lake, North Carolina. We were out exploring and came across an apparent dump site for unwanted fiberglass animals, probably from mini golf type places. Further exploration led to the elephant's mother, lying on its side, an orca, and an extra creepy mannequin that I thought was a dead body at first. It's even a mannequin, but in case it thankfully was. For years afterwards, I plotted how to get the baby elephant, but no luck. White Lake elephants. When I was 12 years old, about 17 years ago, I found this cool-looking tree way back in the woods behind my house. I lived in the middle of nowhere, so there's lots of woods back there. And when I got closer, I noticed there was something in the huge opening at the bottom of the tree. There was a bunch of really old glassware, such as cups and bowls, wrapped up perfectly in old newspaper. Super random and creepy, like why would someone put that stuff in a tree way back in the woods? Horseshoe Lake, Mammoth Mountain, California. There's a fantastic hiking trail that loops around the lake. About a quarter of the way in is the foundation of a house and bits of the chimney. The lake is known for carbon dioxide poison gas seeping into the soil and killing trees and providing a moderate danger to anyone or anything under 1 feet tall. This is likely why the house was abandoned. However, a few meters off the hiking trail, I discovered the foundation of something. I couldn't figure out what it was, and not even r/architecture could definitively identify what it was supposed to be. There's a giant forest right next to my house. I sometimes go down there to draw, chill, take pictures, etc. One time I was laying on a hammock that was set up by the people who last lived there. I lost my balance and fell out of the hammock, and right before I fell I saw a knife sticking straight up in the air. Planted it in the dirt so it would stick right up. The knife did not stab me, but it caught on my sweater, and I was just thinking how lucky I was. Also, right by the knife there was a wooden cross, like a 6 by 6 foot wooden cross. I don't go to the forest anymore. We live in a rural area. On the very far edge of our property is a random set of stairs, about a story high. I didn't even care at first, just told my husband whoever dumped their reno trash out here sucked. Then he introduced me to Reddit stairs in the woods stories and shit. He had to make rotting house litter creepy instead of it just being a climbing and lockjaw hazard. Now I'm too damn irrationally scared to go back to that creepy corner in our woods and have forbidden the kids, telling them the crazy neighbors own that spot and shoot trespassers to keep them from going back there. Stupid creepy nightmare stairs. The abandoned remains of a cheese factory complete with industrial revolutionary train tracks in the Catskills of upstate New York. My cousins live on property that was once my great-grandparents', so my mom spent most of her summers up there growing up, as did I. When I was about 6 or 7 and my older cousin convinced another cousin and I to sneak off to see, it was on private property. The creepiest part about it was just how secluded it was. Found out from my mom after that if you followed the train tracks, It led to some kind of gorge. Apparently, there used to be a bridge on said gorge, but the bridge had collapsed with the train on it and killed everyone on board. My mother said when she was a kid, they'd found a shoe and a hat near there, and one of my cousins has railroad spikes they'd taken from the train tracks. I've always wanted to go back.
I would think that a bridge collapse with a train falling and people dying would be easily findable information on the internet nowadays, so maybe it's true.
Happened a few years ago when me and my buddies went into the woods at around 9 p.m. To get to the woods, you have to cross an old road that leads to a waterworks factory. This road separates the housing estate and the woods. Well, we were crossing this road and decided to enter through a different place we'd never been to before, and we were only halfway down the road when something whistled at us. You may be thinking, it's probably just your mates, or something like that, but this was different. We knew it was coming from the bushes almost instantly and legged it back toward the houses. Naturally, my fight or flight impulses kicked in and I ran, but in the complete opposite direction to my buddies. They ran back the way we came. For some stupid reason, I ran straight toward the place the whistle came from, realized I was going the wrong way, screamed, saw a silhouette of a man in the bush, and nearly fell over trying to turn around. We all regrouped and made the ultimate collective decision to go back in. Nothing. No person, no second whistle, no speakers or anything. The silhouette I saw was gone, so we went into the trees and found an opening, like a little circle of ground in amongst the trees. We found a little teddy bear, as if it was deliberately placed and positioned where it was, sitting on top of 2 twigs made to look like a cross, and 4 other sticks holding the bear in place. We took a picture, left, and never came back. I've since lost contact with my buddies due to me starting college and them entering their final year of high school. But I tried going there, though, just last week, but all the paths have been blocked by fallen trees due to recent red warning winds in the UK. Storm Arwen ruined a beautiful forest and buried a mystery we never got to solve. TLDR. My friends and I were whistled at by something in the woods and we ran, went back and found a small teddy bear, as if it was a ritual. Riding a dirt bike in the woods of Northern California, I spotted 2 women, likely a mother and daughter, peeking at me from behind a rock outcropping. They were wearing what I would call Amish dresses, but basically just old-timey, full-length and very old-fashioned. Where I was on the border of a 1,600-acre parcel of private land, another that belongs to the county and has a landfill lower on the mountain, and a couple of other big parcels. Can't build up there, too steep, no utilities, but a few long-abandoned sawmills. You used to find illegal grows up there. It's very secluded. I had to ride past them, but I was super creeped out. So I slowed down and said, "Good morning, ladies. Have you seen 8 other guys on motorcycles come through here yet?" I was by myself, but wished I wasn't. To which they replied, "We ain't, but I don't think our menfolk would take kindly to y'all riding their bikes up her." This is NorCal. That accent is about 2,500 miles out of place. That's an Eastern Tennessee accent. What the F? I know who owns the land I was riding on, and it sure wasn't them. I'd previously lived in the Deep South, so I mustered a pleasant, "Go with Jesus," because it was a Sunday, and got the hell out of there. Middle of nowhere in Alaska, me and my stepdad find an abandoned car. It was creepy because it looked perfectly clean, literally perfect dealership clean, and there were no roads or trails for miles. We were on 4-wheelers hunting. There were no tire tracks, the interior was spotless clean, and the keys in the ignition. How this car even got there in the forest, who knows? No way it drove there on its own. Who knows how it didn't get scratched up, or why a spotless, new-looking car was abandoned in the middle of nowhere. It didn't have plates. We go back about 7 miles until we get cell service, call up a trooper friend. A few hours later, they arrive. We go back to the car, it's not there anymore. There are marks where the car sat in the snow, but no tire trails going anywhere. It hasn't snowed since yesterday, so no way new snowfall covered any tire trails. We searched around for another few hours before giving up. Trooper friend keep asking my stepdad if we're just effing with him. A few years ago, I was out by the lake with my dad and 2 dogs. It was near a foresty area that was surrounded by a lot of farmland. There were also some stables near the lake, so it wasn't unusual to see a group of people out riding. Well, me and my dad decided to split up so that our dogs will sprint from me to my dad and vice versa. They adore doing that. So I walk up a hill and reached a trail, and then I saw something. I physically stopped walking, frozen in place. I felt like I was in a movie or something. A few meters ahead of me was the leg of a horse. I got scared, but I wasn't 100% sure if it actually was a horse's leg, so I stepped a little closer to it. It still looked like a limb, so I stepped even closer. I felt like a complete idiot. It turned out to be a massive tree branch that was shaped like a horse's leg when you looked at it from a certain angle. I felt stupid, but really relieved at the same time.
I like this story because oftentimes things that seem frightening and terrifying to the individual in the moment, you realize is just something innocuous, and then you laugh about it and tell the story on Reddit.
We live in rural East Texas, in what is considered to be the Bigfoot capital of Texas. My family has lived on our property for over 100 years now. In the late fall of 2020, we began having what most would consider odd activity on our property. Now, to preface, our property is mostly woods and swamp and butts up against more properties that are even less visited that are also forest and swamp. Some of the neighboring properties only have people visit for a few days each year in deer season and are otherwise vacant of humans all year. And some of the waterways get into pretty dark and isolated stretches of river bottoms. In the evenings around sunset and into the near earlier hours of the night, we began to hear, on occasion, odd bird-like whistling noises coming from the woods across from the road in the forest and swamp area. Our homes are on the other side of the road from the undeveloped property, and these weird noises would come from the woodline near and after nightfall sometimes. It sounded like birds whistling and chirping, except it didn't sound exactly like birds. It sounded like something doing a really good job of mimicking birds whistling and chirping. This went on for months, but sadly I never got any audio recordings of anything. My father, an experienced hunter and woodsman, said he kept trying to locate the source of the noises, but when he would get closer to the woods, the sounds would move away from him, further into the woods. He said it would continue to do so, almost as if whatever was making the noises was trying to lure him into the woods. Having seen too many movies, he opted out of that situation and went into the house. This all climaxed in January 2021, when I went out to our vehicle to get something from out of the back of the vehicle, and suddenly, from not far into the woodline, I heard the most chilling noise I've ever heard in my life. As I was retrieving my bag, a loud animal-type roar erupted from the woodline near the gate that accesses our property, which is located just opposite the road as my driveway. I've spent my entire life studying and working with animals, namely exotics, and the best I can compare the sound to is a large male silverback gorilla roaring. I want you to understand that this sound was primal and alarming that I actually mildly pissed myself reflexively. I searched for days on YouTube, and the closest sound I found was a video of a male gorilla at a zoo suddenly roaring to intimidate some onlookers. And it gets weirder from here still. Not being one to simply assume my family's being haunted by some monster, I decided to grab my headlamp, sidearm, and AK-47 rifle and head down into the woods to see what was making these sounds. I wish I could say that I saw a huge Sasquatch and had some epic shootout, but I didn't. I sat in my vehicle in the woods in total darkness for some time. I even played the Sierra sounds over my vehicle's speakers to see if anything would show up, but sadly and perhaps thankfully nothing did. However, before leaving the woods, I headed back up to our cabin to make sure everything was normal around the cabin. We've actually had people break in before, so I wanted to make sure everything was as it should be. I searched the immediate area with my headlamp and rifle, and while there were some large animals that stayed just out of my line of sight due to the thick undergrowth, I'm most certainly certain that it was a feral pig, which can get very large and dangerous. The oddest pet of all is that when I checked the slough, a semi-permanent body of standing water near our cabin, there was an animal in the tree I still cannot identify. This small animal was about 2 feet tall, sitting on its haunches, and about a foot wide. It had no obvious or visible tail, and appeared to clearly have 4 appendages. It was invisible, some sort of mammal, but since the water was higher than normal due to a wet winter, I couldn't get a better angle or get close to it without wading into the icy water. This animal had silver-colored fur, with texture rather similar looking to that of a chinchilla. And for all my attempts, it would never show its face or paws, as it kept all those distinguishing features tucked into its body like it was sleeping, despite it clearly reacting to the sounds I made on the ground. I've tried everything I can think of to identify this creature. It was not a possum, it was not a raccoon, it was not an owl or young owl with downy feathers. I cannot place this animal with any local species of fauna, even if some health issues like mange. The closest thing I've been able to find is a silvery Gibson, which are obviously not native to eastern Texas. My wife still half jokes that I found a baby Sasquatch tucked away in a tree by its parent, and I honestly don't know what to think about all this. But after that night, we haven't had any more strange activity that I'm aware of. I'm a very open-minded yet rational person. I've grown up in these woods. I've studied and kept numerous animal species. I've helped with government ecological projects in our area. I've taught biology and ecology classes. But this will baffle me for the rest of my life. Did I find a baby Sasquatch?